August 4th, 2026. Well, as we cover a lot of different topics on this channel, I hope everybody understands that I'm not a one note that just hits on one thing. So, so check in and see what else we'll be carrying. This today, I want to kind of get into a couple of issues, basically, well, maybe three. First of all, of course, Trump's has aborted his massive attack he was going to lay onto Iran, largely because of opposition from our Arab allies in the Gulf. They want to give peace a little bit more chance, and so we'll see how that plays, of course. But the main topic I'm going to get into to begin with is this the upcoming primaries here and the outcome of them. I mean, I think we already kind of know what's going to happen. Unless there's a surprise, this Abdul El Said is going to get the Democrat nomination on the for the Senate race in Michigan, and there's another lady named Francesca Hong who looks to be the Democrat nominee for coming out for governor of Wisconsin. That one is particularly weird. I mean, I think at least there's a significant Muslim population in Michigan, but I mean, a Korean population in Wisconsin? And these are two really radical and really extreme and out of place candidates. Hardly who you'd want for as a central casting for running for those offices if you're the Democrat Party and you're looking to win the races. Just as we're probably going to be set to most likely lose North Carolina Senate no matter what, I think. I mean, that Cooper guy seems to have everybody calm down there, and I don't know. But as far as this one goes, I don't know. But El Said, I guess, is running against this other lady who's doesn't look to me to be that impressive either as a candidate, actually. But the party regulars in Wisconsin are pretty much backing her, and El Said seems to have the momentum of the people, unless something really turns around on election night here, which will be, probably by the time most people see this will have happened. This looks to me to bode well for a Republican win in that Senate race, and so that's an interesting. And similarly, I would really be surprised if this Hong character who's apparently against Thanksgiving, Christmas, and doesn't like white people, and I don't. It seems like she's kind of, of course, both of them are trying to distance themselves from the Democrat Socialists of America and some of their ridiculous radical policies. So that'll be interesting to see just how that plays out. But it looks to me like that puts a couple of competitive areas where we might be likely to lose with the right candidate on the Democrat Party in a position where we'll be most likely to probably win. I mean, we have the ongoing, situation in some other areas which get competitive. I mean, the idea that Texas is now considered competitive is really on the Senate race as well. At any rate, that's another one. And of course, we continually get hit with these really bad Fox polls. I mean, if this was some Democrat organization like, I don't know, the Washington Post, the New York Times or something, come up with numbers like they come up with, I'd say, well, what do you expect? But Fox is like, they're coming out with numbers worse than the New York Times Siena, for instance. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's going on with that? But I've been critical of Fox polls for years. I mean, the news coverage is okay, the opinion content is okay, but the polling is just garbage. But anyhow, so I don't know this. To me, although the Democrats do have one little problem, I think, for the Michigan thing, that if El Said was defeated, that might actually tick off their Muslim group, which is still part of their voter base. And if he wins, it'll probably tick off independents and sane people who wouldn't want to vote for somebody who thinks that we deserve 9/11. I mean, this is, I think it's a little bit it's not the optimum candidate. Normally you want somebody like the person they came up, like Spanberger that they had for governor of Virginia, who lies very good and pretends to be a moderate, then goes pretty left-wing radical once she gets in office on day one. That's the kind of thing you expect from Democrats. And the main theme I would probably try for the Republicans to focus on is the fact that you can't trust the Democrats. They're very dishonest. If they don't believe they're moderate, and their main thing, I think, they're one of the things. Well, some of the stuff that the DSA people are saying is so extreme it isn't even good communism. Okay, if any kind of communism is good. I mean, have you ever heard of a communist country that didn't have prisons or police? I mean, seriously, how do you enforce the regime's authority if you don't? So obviously they're lying about that for sure. So at any rate, so that's kind of something to be watching for here, and see what the aftermath of it is in the next couple of days. See how that plays out. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or of course, to the people I'm posting on Rumble, of course, it's the same thing here. Like favorable comments also, or unfavorable if you have something you disagree with, which some people will. Yeah, so that's kind of that on the political front. I just think it's an interesting situation. Now on the war, getting back to that one, it's kind of interesting that what you're really looking at is that I think that you have, well, for one thing, we don't know exactly what we really want to do that would actually manage to bring the Iranians completely to heel. I think. In fact, I even suggested in one comment, being half facetious, that Trump wasn't really planning on attacking. He was just making comments to try to, influence them, let's say. On the other, we are running a little bit low on munitions compared to what we'd like to have, considering we want to have preparation for other scenarios. For instance, the Chinese and Taiwan, for example, scenario. And also, I mean, on the Ukraine and NATO thing, I mean, that's another one that we have to think about. There are other things that may be more, are kind of important also. So there's no doubt we could do some more damage. And of course, I presume nuclear weapons are completely off the table on this one. So, I mean, that wouldn't take many strikes to do a lot of damage, but I don't think we want to become the pariah of the world, probably. And so I don't think that's going to happen. So you're getting into blowing up power plants and bridges and stuff like that. And in fact, in a sense, I think that I still think the idea of doing those kind of strikes have some merit. But the problem is they're afraid that the Iranians will be able to knock out their water desalination plants on the Arab side, which they're much more dependent on than the Iranians are, because Iranians have more natural water supplies. I think they're not quite as desert areas. Well, they have a lot of desert, but it's not as extreme, I don't think, as it is in Saudi Arabia, for example, or whatever, Kuwait, whatever. So you got that aspect of it, and also the oil production facilities, So that when you live in a glass house, you really don't want to throw rocks, right? And given that the defensive capabilities have proven to be inadequate to really protect them, and we're running low on interceptor missiles. In fact, apparently we don't have any to spare for those poor Ukrainians who are getting the heck blown out of them now. That's a separate topic, but I think that so apparently they've decided to give another round of negotiation between Oman and Iran, particularly on the Strait of Hormuz and how that'll be handled. And frankly, it may be possibly the best thing to do from our point of view at this point is just to try to make a deal on that. And I mean, we may just have to shelve the whole nuclear issue, I think, in terms of that, because first of all, I don't think they're in any position to really make a significant set of nuclear weapons right now, anyhow, after the attacks of last year and what we've maybe done this year too. And so, the fact that they don't promise not to, is that really the big issue? I mean, they already had a fatwa against it. They do want to be a threshold state with 60% enriched uranium. But here's the problem. I mean, if we can't really, even if they make a deal, they could be lying. So is them signing a treaty saying they won't do this really worth what we're doing anyhow? I think the whole thing was and the original idea of this whole war, we have to remember, was that the people would rise up after we did these attacks against the Revolutionary Guard's capabilities, and they would rise up and overthrow the ayatollahs, or the clerics, and take control of the country. Well, that just didn't happen, and it isn't going to happen anytime soon, right? So, given that the basic premise of the plan was a flop, and I thought that was how it was going to really work, if it was going to work, and it didn't work. I mean, the thing you need to do, it seems to me, I'm just guessing, is to ease out of this, unless we really do have a capability that will bring them to heel. But I don't know what that is, and can we do it without inflicting too much damage to our own allies? So that's kind of my thought on that. We'll see what happens, but as I understand it, that there are ships that are getting through there, some by coordinating with the Iranians, and others are just turning their transponders off and going through anyhow. And again, that seems to me to be, maybe this whole thing will kind of break down, but we don't know how strong the Iranians really are. The ability to launch a missile or two, like the 5 or something they launched a few days ago, yeah, sure, they could probably launch 10 if they wanted to. But the question is do they really have a substantial capability still? That's what's really unclear. There was some discussion of doing some pretty extreme bombardment of the areas right around the Strait of Hormuz and the surrounding provinces, and sort of destroying the power plants and the bridges and stuff, infrastructure in that area so thoroughly that maybe that area would sort of collapse. And that's been kind of kicked around. So anyway, that's kind of what was being discussed and what Trump canceled. So anyway, so that's kind of how that goes. We'll have to just keep this an ongoing development. And I was looking at gas prices, and I checked them. It depends on where you are. I mean, if you're in, like California, your gas prices are always kind of high. In some areas, where I am, it's certainly higher than it was. It's higher than it was at the bottom when when the memorandum of misunderstanding was signed. But it's, I'd say, about 40 cents higher than a gallon than that for regular, where I am. So I don't know where it is every place else. But and I understand one of the biggest issues is diesel. Because of they need the more harder, less sweet, as I say, less sweet oil to make that stuff with the refineries we have currently set up, and we're not set up to do it. Well, at any rate, that's another issue. I'm on oil. All right, so that's kind of that. On the other front, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, to make a few comments there. I saw a video the other day by a guy named it's called Cappy's Army. It went on for about 30 minutes. and I was just laughing at how, I put a comment like, was the script for this prepared by the Ukrainian Information Ministry? I mean, it's absurd. Of course, conditions in the Russian army are not like the conditions in the U.S. Army. Okay, yes, it's a harsher environment. And occasionally some really nasty stuff happens. But then again, in some of our special forces units, there have been some pretty serious things happen too. I can remember a case where a SEAL killed a Green Beret in Africa, of hazing instances in the Marine Force Recon. Okay, so this is happening not just the elite units. Who knows what goes on in Spetsnaz training, but if you're talking about just the regular army has some pretty, well, I agree with that. But so that's the way it is in Russia. What can I say? I'm glad I'm not there. The point I'm getting at is, that doesn't mean they're ineffective. But he was presenting the idea that Russian troops are going to be dead within 30 minutes of getting to the front or something like that. And I'm like, no, some of them will be, of course. But in general, no, that's not the case. Yes, there are drone attacks that occur to people trying to get to the front. Absolutely. But it isn't. But they're still presenting the idea that the Russians are all dead, but somehow they ignore the fact they're still gaining ground, more or less. I think there's kind of a meat grinder down in Zaporizhia because they're trying to protect a city that has, I think, hundreds of thousands, maybe a million, pretty large city. I think the third largest in Ukraine, I think, and they're trying to protect that. So they're fighting very hard on that one. I understand they brought in a whole bunch of Colombian mercenaries too to fight there. And that one's kind of in a stalemate, I think. That earlier in the year, the Ukrainians were advancing on that front, and then they kind of got pushed back a little, and now it's kind of a stalemate. Otherwise, the Russians are pretty much advancing everywhere. I mean, on the ground war. And meanwhile, Ukraine has done a bunch of things, destroyed a bunch of stuff. I saw one today, a video where the Ukrainians actually bombed a beach where a bunch of people, families were at a beach somewhere. They fought a drone in and bombed the beach. And I don't know if anybody was killed or not, but if it was probably civilians. It looks almost like a terroristic attack. Somebody said it was near where Putin has a vacation house, but they didn't hit his vacation house. They bombed the beach. So, but let's look at what they seem to continually do futile things. For instance, all these attacks on the ships in the Sea of Azov, right? They did that. And then what happened? Russia went in and just blew the heck out of the port facilities and all the ships that are coming into Odessa, which is where they get their grain exported. They basically shut that down now. They lost this major grain export port capability because they wanted to shoot some Russian ships with drones. They don't seem to think, they seem to be willing to endure any amount of punishment just to do something kind of, tweak the Russians some, and this is also hurting Kazakhstan, which is, they're trying to export their oil, which actually basically takes more oil off the market and goes against our interests in Iran, right? I mean, we want alternative sources of oil from Iran so that we can keep the price down. And this isn't Russian oil, this is Kazakhstan, an independent country. So I think, I just find that this whole thing to be crazy, and we're obviously supporting this with our satellites and our intelligence, obviously, and we don't seem to be doing a very good job of controlling it to our own interests. And meanwhile, the other day, there was a big thing about a house was killed and 10 people were killed, and then I said, they actually fired a missile, a very expensive missile to hit a civilian house, the Russians did. It turns out, I think they were actually hit a munitions dump with a lot of secondary explosions, which it was located in a residential area. When it blew up, well, civilians got hurt because the munitions dump blew up because they located it in a residential area. So that's the kind of thing that's going on there. It's we'll have to see what happens as an ongoing development. But that's about what I have for this video. As always, I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble, and the addresses of my social media accounts will be in the description below. So all for this time.